We're continuing our studies of the three Shavuot, the Gimel Shavuot, the three oaths that the Jewish people are supposedly not allowed to violate. We're doing Kuzari, yeah. Since the Kuzari was discussing about going back to the land of Israel, we brought up that there are many people in the Orthodox community who believe that you're not allowed to establish the state of Israel because it's too soon, the Mashiach didn't come, This is all the conversation they have. And last week I walked you through the 13 answers to this question about there are three oaths that you're not allowed to violate.
Is it in here?
No. And we now need to know what are the answers to that. Let's start with answer number 1. When it says in the Talmud, in Masechet Ketubot, that you're not allowed to go to the land of Israel bechoma, in a wall. Shelo ya'alu bechoma. The Jewish people cannot come to Israel as a wall. What does Rashi say? Rashi writes, Yachad, the Jewish people are not allowed to come together, biyad chazakah, with a mighty hand. Until the redemption comes, the Jewish people are not allowed to come together with a mighty hand. So remember, there's 13 answers. This is answer number 1. So zoom in on answer number 1. Don't worry about everything else you're thinking right now. This is what Avnei Nezer writes. Avnei Nezer writes in Yoredea. דבר מה שכתבתי באות נון וו, שאם יותן רשות לכולם לעלות, לא יהיה שבועה. That which it says that you're not allowed to go up together with a mighty hand, bechoma, that's only when the nations of the world do not give you permission to go. But if the nations of the world give you permission to go, then it's not a rebellion in the nations of the world, and you're able to go. The Rashi piresh, because that's exactly what Rashi says, yachad, together, biyad chazakah, with a mighty hand. But if they give you permission to go, so there's no mighty hand. We didn't go conquer anything, we went.
Why would it be only if the rest of the world agreed?
We're giving 13 answers to a question. So this is answer number 1.
Okay.
Also, maybe I'll add, there's a book called Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yonatan was written by Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. You may have heard of him. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy is my wife's great-great-great-grandfather. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy writes that even if the nations of the world give us permission to go, we're not allowed to go. Because it says, we cannot go. And when the Avnei Nezer was asked, so what do you think about the opinion of the great rabbi, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, this is what he says. He answers, Divrei Drashahem. Well, the book of Rabbi Yonatan is a book of speeches from Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. It's a drasha. He was given the Dvar Torah. You don't learn halachot from the Dvar Torah. Because when someone says a Dvar Torah, they're not intending to teach you halakha. They're intending to give you an idea. Oftentimes speakers will even choose an idea they don't believe in. But they'll use that to show something, to illustrate something, and therefore we don't learn. It's a classic teaching in Judaism. We don't learn halakha from dreams. We don't learn halakha from prophecies. We don't learn halakha from drashot. We learn halakha from books of halakha. ואלף כיוצא בהם לא יזיזו דברי רש"י ממקומם. And even if 1,000 speeches you'll find that say that if we have permission we can go back, 1,000 speeches will not move the words of Rashi from their place. Rashi says that it has to be biyad chazakah, with a mighty hand. If it's not with a mighty hand, it's okay. He says, and I'm certain that if Rabbi Yonatan Halevy was here, he would tell you that in halakha he does not disagree with Rashi. He just was using it for a speech. If you look, Rashi writes in Masechet Sotah, page 36. Rashi says that the Jews were decreed, v'nigzar alehem shlo ya'alu ela birshut. The Jews were decreed that they would not be allowed to go to Israel unless they have permission from Hashem, or permission from the world, some kind of permission. This permission, you see Rashi again, you see explicitly he's mentioning permission. Know about this problem with Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. This is bothering, especially the rabbis of Ashkenaz. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy is a big rabbi from Ashkenaz. So everyone wants to rely on him. See, you're not allowed to go to Israel. to build your own country, even with permission. So that's why we don't support Zionism. There's a book called the Shem HaGedolim, the name of the great. Some is printed in 1 volume, sometimes 2 volumes, sometimes it's 4 volumes. I have all those editions at home. The Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, a Moroccan rabbi, wrote this book. He wrote this book, according to legend, in prison. He was arrested, and in prison he had 1 or 2 nights there. Someone in Europe, he used to travel in Europe, and they said, oh, this is a North African man that's traveling here in Europe. They arrested him. And until he was able to get out to the Jewish community, he was put in prison with no books, with nothing, with just paper they gave him, paper and pen. So they claim that he sat down in those 2 nights and he wrote this whole encyclopedia. One of them is an encyclopedia of all the rabbis' names he had ever heard of in his life. Past generations, current generations, all the authors of books. And the second volume is all the names of any book he'd ever seen in the Jewish community. Who wrote it, why they wrote it, what other rabbi wrote about it. Sometimes there are mistakes in the Shem HaGedolim, like you'll see he'll mention them. Sometimes that happens because he's relying on one other book that said a story about this one, but that book had a mistake. Or sometimes you say he was sitting without any of his books, and he wrote a book. So if he got 99% right by heart, it's okay. You can let him make a mistake or two. The Shem HaGedolim writes that Rabbi Yonatan Halevy did not write this book, Ahavat Yonatan. His students wrote this book based on speeches they had heard from him, meaning they kind of transcribed his speeches. And one great rabbi told Rabbi Avraham Yelin that you shouldn't rely on the things that his students write, because sometimes his students don't understand him correctly. And then in general, unless you hear it from him himself, you shouldn't accept it as a fact. So he added to that in another part of this book in Parashat Ekev, it seems that Rabbi Yonatan Halevy is contradicting himself from what he says over here. So clearly, it's not the work of his own pen, and you don't have to worry about it so much.
He contradicts himself and says, yes, it's okay to go to the land of Israel?
Could be. Yeah. There's some other answers I have for Yonatan Halevy, I don't want to get stuck on him. The Maharsha writes that based on Ezra and Nehemiah, how could Ezra and Nehemiah then, if you're not allowed to go back to Israel, how did Ezra and Nehemiah do it on their own? Because they had permission from the God. Once you had permission from the nations of the world, they could go. There's a rabbi called Rav Kasher. There's 2 Rav Kashers, the father and a son. The father was the Hasidei Gu, if I'm not mistaken, but the father was a very big Zionist. And he wrote many books about Zionism, about Halakha and Zionism, about the state of Israel, and so on and so forth. A lot of yeshivot have his books, but they don't know who he really was, or they won't have his books. The Midrash says, Et HaChazir, the pig, Zo Edom. Who is the pig? Edom. Edom are referred to as a pig. Velama nikra shma Chazir. Why do they call the pig Chazir? Everyone always likes to read this Baro because Chazir will come back and be kosher. What is Chazir? It does mean come back. Shemechazeret atara lebala. It will give back the crown to its proper owners. He says, therefore, I'm reading now from Rav Kasher, Shehitnabu azeh shanotzrim. Who's Edom? Who eats pig from all the nations of the world?
The Christians.
The Christians are the only ones who eat pig. Those who eat pig, nichbeshu kodem hageula Eretz Yisrael miyad Ishmaelim. They will conquer the land of Israel before the redemption from the Ishmaelim, from the Arabs. Vehem yachziru al Israel, and they will be the ones, chazir, pig, that will yachziru. They will give back the land of Israel to the Jewish people. They will take it from the Ishmaelim and give it to the Jews. Like you see right now, it's happening in our generation. There's a midrash and a zohar that says something similar also. That the Christians will take the land from the Muslims and give it to the Jews. That's something we see happen already to us. It already happened. It's not something that will happen in the future. It already happened. So he says, what else do you want? It's not that the nations of the world, the nations of the world literally handed it to us on a silver platter. Now today they might regret it, like most people. They do something wrong, then they regret it afterwards, and they want to blame you for it. It happens all the time. Rav Natan Tzvi Friedman writes something similar in his book Netzer Matai. He says that after the nations of the world decided to give back the land that they stole from us, Who they say? It's not from us, not from anybody else. If they took it from the Arabs, the British, and gave it to us, the Arabs didn't own it. The Arabs took it from someone else, who took it from someone else, who took it from us. So if someone gives us back something that was stolen from us, we haven't done any violation of the nations of the world. We got back what we deserve. Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Techta, remember I showed you his book last week? Yeah, he writes the same thing. It says in Midrash on Shir HaShirim, Arba Shavuot Yishbeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu D'Yisrael. There are 4 oaths the Jewish people took from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Im ta'iru, v'im toraru, et ha'ava, et shetechpat. What does it mean? That you will not awaken the love before the time comes? The Midrash says that you will not take the land of Israel until the nations of the world give you weapons to take back the land of Israel. That's what the Midrash says. Says Rav Kasher, that's what happened to us. The nations of the world gave us weapons. We were armed. You should know who was the ally of the Jewish people in the beginning of the state of Israel. Not the Americans. Americans didn't want to help us. They helped us declare independence, but they were... In general, this country, when it has been a friend to Israel, only to serve its interest, like every other country. But there were many, many, many years in this country's history where it didn't help the Jewish people. After the Holocaust, after the founding of the State of Israel, the French helped us out. Yeah, now they don't. It's always how it works. The French and the Russians had some kind of problem. The Russians were with Egypt. I'm not an expert in history, but the French helped the Israelis because they wanted to spite the Russians who were with the Egyptians. Yeah. Rav Chaim David Chazan, who was the Sephardic Rishon LeZion, he also writes the same thing, that the nations of the world give you permission to go. There's no violation of the 3 oaths. Now, any one of these answers isn't enough to throw away this Orthodox community's opposition to Zionism. But I'm going to give 13 answers with dozens and dozens of poskim, because there is no leg for them to stand at all. It's not just that we have a good answer back. It's that their whole basis is flawed. Now, there's a number of kadmonim, of early rabbis, not in our generation, not who saw what happened in the state of Israel and allowed for it. A number of older rabbis that saw what's going, they said maybe hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago, that the redemption is going to come with permission of the nations of the world. That's what they assumed would happen. And it would be not just allowed that way, that's how it should happen. Who are they? Rabbi Moshe ben Machir, in his book Seder Hayom. Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman writes that. Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, he's a commentary in the Tanakh. Rabbi Yosef ibn Kasbi, Rabbeinu Bachai, you've heard of him? Rabbi Yitzchak Abarbanel, Don Yitzchak. Mari Bach, he's the father of the Maharal Bach. Rabbeinu Saad Yagon. Ribuda Chai al-Kedai. Rav Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher was an Ashkenazi rabbi who was fighting for political Zionism way before the state of Israel. The Gaon of Vilna, the Malbim, the Chavetz Chaim. They all wrote that the Geulah is going to begin when the nations of the world give permission to the Jewish people to go home. That, when the United Nations voted, that, for us, the United Nations is maybe a joke, yeah? But at that point in time, we weren't even one of the United Nations. And when the United Nations voted as a majority to allow us to go back to Eretz Israel, we don't need their permission to go home. But their permission shows that the time for us to go home has arrived. It shows something. Because 100 years before that, 15 years before that, nobody was voting to send the Jewish people home. They were voting to send the Jewish people to the gas chambers. It means something. We may not care about the UN because they are just a tool in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when they together agreed for us to go home, it means something. Also, halachically, if you believe that one of these 3 vows would hold you back, we mentioned the Rambam Shulchan Aruch does not believe that it's forbidden for the Jewish people to go back home. But we're going on the assumption that the Satmar Rebbe is right, and that it is forbidden to go back home. So these are the answers. What are you going to argue with? The nations of the world let us go, and these are dozens of rabbis we quoted so far, classic sources that allow us to go home. The Chavetz Chaim, I want to read to you, because we know who the Chavetz Chaim is. We study his books. Hagiula ha'atida, he writes, with the future redemption. Efshar shetiyeh b'derech hateva, it could be that it will happen all naturally, the redemption. There won't be miracles there. Alidei she'akadosh baruch hu noten belev malchei ha'umot, that Hashem will give into the hearts of the kings of the nations, the Hetivim Israel, to do good to the Jewish people. Uchinyan shneimar bekoresh, like we have in the Tanakh about Koresh, who goes back and sends the Jewish people back home. V'hi'id Rabbi Yaakov Leib, who was the Av Beidin of the Ashkenazim in Jerusalem, he writes, how long did he write this? About 90 years before the founding of the State of Israel. He writes that these words, that the Jewish people will go back home with the permission of the nations of the world, Muskam, it says, Kol Anshe Eretz Yisrael. All the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael that he met believed that this would happen. Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, that the nations of the world will let us come home and we would establish our own country. When the Balfour Declaration was made, a lot of rabbis mentioned that this is already the beginning of the nations. And we know the Balfour Declaration had its problems and its pitfalls, but that meant something. And the rabbis of the world who said that was a significant accomplishment, Rabbi Meir Simcha Vodvinsk, the Rebbe of Sakhachov, Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the Chavetz Chaim, and Rav Kook. These are now, why are we quoting so many Ashkenazi rabbis? Remember, the Sephardic countries, the opposition to Zionism didn't exist. And therefore, it maybe existed minusculely, only when they came to Israel and met rabbis who were anti-Zionists. And therefore, we don't have much literature supporting Zionism and Sephardic sources because we didn't have to argue so much with anybody. It would be like, why don't we have many Sephardic sources saying that it's a mitzvah to keep Shabbat? Everybody knows that already. It's only when you start to come to America and you see, or Moshe Feinstein, they're dealing with Jews who don't believe you have to keep Shabbat. All of a sudden, people start writing books about how you have to keep Shabbat. Understand? It's not that our rabbis didn't have what to say. Our rabbis simply didn't need to say anything because they weren't dealing with anybody who had these problems. Maybe a few little notes. So the bottom line is, these vows that we took, that we're not allowed to go to Israel, according to the Agadata and the Talmud, because Hashem hasn't called us back in, and until then we cannot rebel to the nations of the world, all that fell away the moment that the nations of the world gave us permission to go. The second answer to this question. So it's 2 out of 13. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a divine sign that it's time to go back home, there is no longer any prohibition of going back home. So the first one was if the nations of the world give us permission. The second answer, though, is if Hashem gives us permission to go back home, then there's no reason not to go back home.
So what was the sign?
What?
What was the sign that Hashem gave?
Now we're going to discuss that. The first sign. There's maybe 5 different signs. The same Avnei Nezel I quoted before. He writes that when the nations of the world give permission, that is a divine sign. Because who gave it in their heart to give us permission? It's not just a human thing that happened. Why would all the countries that voted for us vote for us? What, they woke up now and loved the Jewish people? Perhaps if you think about that, after the Holocaust and before the founding of the State of Israel, is probably the lowest period in Jewish history in maybe 100 years, maybe more, 200 years. Meaning, before the Holocaust, we had what to be proud of. We were a huge community. The European Jewish community was a beautiful. We're talking about the lowest point in our decimation. The Jewish people are in DP camps. They're coming to America. It's not like what American Jews look like today. The German Jews that were here before didn't want us. They were already Americanized. They didn't want the European people. They smelled that. All kinds of things that happened here. So the Jewish people came. We were not immigrants is not the right word. A person who is an immigrant is like, oh, I have a family. I'm going to go visit over there. I'm coming here. We were refugees. We showed up Lower East Side in New York. We showed up in Canada and Mexico, all kinds of places. No money, nothing. No communities. No. Listen, now you're talking about almost a century later. Not exactly, almost a century later. We have synagogues, we have yeshivot, we have rights in this country. Over there, people used to lose their job every Shabbat because they couldn't work on Shabbat. There was no such thing as, you can take off for Sunday if you're Christian, but there's no such thing as taking off for Shabbat. Who are you? Are you Jewish? We don't want your kind here. In La Jolla, until the 1950s. No dogs, no blacks, no Jews. This was the sign.
Wow.
So we're not talking about so long ago. So that period, what makes at that point, see, people want to be pro-Israel now because they might get an investment in a startup company, they might get help in the defense industry, they might get part of our intelligence that we've gathered in Israel. Who knows why they invest in Israel now? But then, why did the majority of the UN vote for us? Don't believe that it's because they loved us. Believe because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who made them want us. I mean, there's no greater sign of Hashem wanting us than the nations of the world wanting us. And that is also what the Gaon of Vilna writes. The second sign that came. When the Jewish people decide that it's time to go back home, that's also a divine sign. What makes Jews want to go home? Right now, if I would offer $1 million in benefits, a house, a car, and a free plane ticket for every American Jew who leaves everything they have here to go to Israel, who's coming?
I'm not.
Who's coming? I didn't ask you. Who's coming? Don't say bad things.
People who aren't attached to their families that are here.
The majority of the Jewish people are coming from the United States. Let's get rid of all the Jews that maybe don't. Let's talk about the Orthodox community, okay? If I come to the Orthodox and say, you know what, sell your house, sell your car, bring your savings, I'm also going to give you a plane ticket and a house in Israel. Who's coming?
Pretty tempting.
Will New York clear out of Jews?
No, probably not.
Will Los Angeles clear out of Jews?
Probably
Will
not.
San Diego clear out of Jews? No. Let's be honest. A few people might go. Who's coming? So, what would make a group of Jews that are not so connected to their Judaism?
Holocaust.
Time before the Holocaust. What makes a group of Jews decide that they're going to go to Israel? They're going to be Zionists and fight malaria and dry up swamps and build buildings and fight the British. What makes a group of people want to do that? Why don't you just stay home?
Insanity.
No, it is insanity. So when the heart of the Jewish people decides, there's something subconsciously that goes to the Jewish people, it's time to go home. Because we've been in Galut for 2,000 years. The Holocaust is terrible. But it's not the first terrible thing that happened to us in Galut. We didn't make a mass aliyah after the pogroms of the Tachvatat, after the Kazan. We still stayed around. So what happened now that was different? HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in the hearts of the Jewish people to go back home. Rabbi Shlomo Teichtal, the author of this book, he writes that when you see the Jewish people go, it's a sign from Hashem that Hashem has inspired subconsciously in the hearts of His people to go back home. And therefore, when you see that happen, that's a divine sign. Actually, see the beauty of this book, and they have it in English. It's called Em Habanim Simecha. I mentioned it last week. Em Habanim Simecha. Em Habanim Simecha. And in English, it's very well done. It has all the translations, all the sources, everything is translated. Rabbi Teichtal. They spell it in English like Teichthal, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Everything, and I mentioned it before, I'll remind you, he was a rabbi who was anti-Zionism before the Holocaust. And in the ghetto, he changed his mind. He took back everything he ever taught in his whole life, and he wrote a book about it. And it's full of sources, proving that everything that he held was wrong. And how the new opinion that he had is correct. And this is probably one of the greatest works of pro-religious Zionism ever done, because it was written by the person who was one of our greatest opponents. I told you one of his grandkids told me, oh, he snapped. You know, they don't translate snap. You see, he went crazy and all of that.
Well, that's after the Holocaust, he's got a lot of sources. It doesn't sound so crazy.
So he writes, Midrash. The Midrash says, אם ראית ספסלים מלאים בבליים מונחים בארץ ישראל, if you're in Eretz Israel and you see benches and benches and benches of Babylonian Jews sitting on those benches, what's Babylonian Jews? When the Talmud is written, Midrash is written, where do the Jews live outside of Israel? Babylon. So Bavel, it just means any Jew outside of Israel. If you see rows and rows and rows of Jews that didn't used to live in Israel living in Israel, just wait for the footsteps of Mashiach. It's right here. The moment you see Jews out of Israel living in Israel, you should know Mashiach is right around the corner. That is a divine sign. And says the Resecha Shlomo Teich, there's no doubt that only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can inspire the socialists and the communists and the religious and non-religious, all to get up and go to Israel and make their own country. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, the author of the Kuzari, he writes in the 5th essay of the Kuzari, 27, he says that when you see that this idea will become prominent in the heart of the Jewish people will get up and go to Israel. This is a sign from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So similar to what we said. The Maharsha says something similar. Rabbi Chaim ben Atta, who's Rabbi Chaim ben Atta? He wrote a book called The Or HaChaim, a commentary on the Chumash. Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Not Orach Chaim, which we study Shulchan Aruch. Or HaChaim. He's the rabbi of the Chidah, the rabbi who I mentioned wrote the encyclopedia of the rabbis. Mm-hmm. This is his rabbi. He writes that the redemption will come when the heart of the Jewish people lights up with the desire to go back to the land of Israel. Rabbi Shuav Kutna wrote the same thing. He said, especially when you see Jews that are not really such prominent Jews, not the best citizens of the Jewish community, but they decide they also want to go home to Israel. So you should know something happening deeper than just a logical desire to go home. It's a deeper push from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, the brother of Rabbi Meir Bar Ilan, Bar Ilan University, the student, or the Rosh Yeshiva B'Yeshivat of Volozhin, the rabbi of Rav Kook. The Netziv writes that now that you see that this idea of returning home to the Jewish people has spread from one corner of the Jewish people to the next, you should know that this is like a sign that the prophets are speaking to us. It's time to go back home. There's a number of other rabbis' names I could quote. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. Rabbi Yonatan Halevy was the Sephardic version of Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher. He was a big mover for political Zionism. This is before Theodor Herzl. This is before Ben Gurion. Way before that. But Rabbi Yonatan Halevy was very good friends with the Rabbi Yehuda Bivas. Yehuda Bivas was a Sephardic rabbi in Saloniki in Greece. He was the rabbi of the Beit Knesset of the grandfather of Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl writes when he was a young boy, he used to love to hear the speeches of this Rabbi Bivas. Notice they turned Herzl as a assimilated Jew who knew nothing about his Judaism, but he used to go to synagogue with his grandfather. His grandfather was a religious man. His grandfather's rabbi was the first rabbi who started writing, about the need for the Jewish people to go back to the land of Israel. For a push for political Zionism, not just religious, not just prayers, but to go, buy land, move to Israel. So when they say that Herzl was the founder of the Zionist state, he was the first one with the idea to go back home, it's a lie. Not taking what to take away from Herzl, but there's an agenda. There's two people who have an agenda. The secular Zionist community has an agenda to show you that religious people, and especially Sephardic people, had nothing to do with the founding of the state of Israel. The religious ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi community has an agenda to show you that who founded the state of Israel? Not religious people, not rabbis, not The people who pushed for the idea of going back to Israel were only secular, anti-religious Jews. And both of those people help each other's story out because it's convenient for them. It's convenient for the secularists to say, look, you guys weren't involved in the state of Israel, you're the enemy of the state of Israel. And it's convenient for the religious Haredi community to say, oh, we have nothing to do with Zionism, they're Reform Jews. I'm using the word Reform. In the Haredi world, anybody who's not them is Reform. It doesn't make a difference actually affiliated with the Reform movement or not. But that's not true. None of this is true. So Bidat Kehillat writes, HaTshuva HaRishona, the first Tshuva, Shiyasu Yisrael B'achid Yamim, the first repentance the Jewish people will do at the end of times, Hu Shivakshu Malchut Shamayim, that they will yearn for the kingdom of heaven, meaning Dahainu Lashuv Eretz Yisrael, to return themselves to the land of Israel. Kedei Shikra HaKadosh Baruch Hu Melech, so that finally Hashem can be called the king of something. Because before this, Hashem is the king of nowhere. Chaz v'shalom, I'm not saying, he's the king of the whole world. But when the Jewish people are home, that means Hashem's nation is home, and Hashem is a king over his nation in his land. Hashem is no longer homeless. That's the first tshuva the Jewish people are going to do at the end of times. Who else agrees with this? Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Teichtel, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, Rav Kook. How many proofs do we need for a person to say the Judaism that I'm presenting that is not a Zionist Judaism is a lie?
So why are some Jews adamantly against if there are proofs like this?
Because they don't care what it says. Like
Why?
everything else. Because they've created a Judaism that sources don't matter.
But why would they object to moving to Israel? I mean, why?
The ultra-Orthodox community classically is against Zionism because they view Zionism as a secularist idea that rebels against Hashem.
Well, if they read a book like this,
It wouldn't make a difference to them. Like if you show them a Shulchan Aruch, says you have to do something, and they don't care. They just do what they want anyways. It's the same group of Jews.
okay, so they're really.
I don't know how long to say, I'm going to keep saying, the Orthodox Jewish community is not a Torah-observant Jewish community.
Yeah.
It's not. They want to pretend to be, not only see the chutzpah, they don't pretend to be a religious Jewish community. They have to pretend to be the only Torah-observant Jewish community. That's even worse. It's not just that they think they're Torah-observant. A lot of people think they're Torah-observant, they don't really know. They think they're the only ones who know. And woe to you if you disagree with them.
Wow. Maybe Hashem doesn't want them there.
I don't want to.
I don't know.
You're not the first one to say that, but I don't want to say that.
Okay.
Okay? So I mean, you're not the first one to say that. I mean, there are more people like you. Even HaShamayim who said such a thing. Land of Israel, not everyone deserves to be in Eretz. Land of Israel knows who it chooses and who it wants.
Maybe just like Hashem.
The Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin says, if you want to look, this is a beautiful Gemara to look up. It's on page 98A. So if you go to Sefaria, put it in Sanhedrin, Sanhedrin 78A, you'll find it. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba says, En lecha ketz megule mizeh. You don't have a greater sign that the redemption has begun than Vatem Hare Yisrael, you mountains of Israel. And it talks about how all the branches will blossom and the flowers will blossom and the fruits will come out. Why? Because the Jewish people are about to come home. Imken kibbutz galiot. So therefore, the giving of the, when you see the land of Israel, it's an agriculture. At least therefore it was founded this way, an agricultural country. We have fruits, we have vegetables, we have plants, we have. Mark Twain, not so long before we founded the state of Israel, went there and said this is a barren wasteland. There are rocks and dirt and nothing grows there. Our rabbis say when you begin to see the land of Israel giving fruit, you should know the redemption has begun. Mm-hmm. It's in the Talmud. It's not something you can argue with. This is written in the Talmud. So many commentaries say, look, when you see the land of Israel giving fruit, the prohibition of going back is over because clearly Hashem this is another divine summons. The Ramban writes this, the Psikta writes this. Rashi, the nephew, Rabbi Meir, the nephew of the Rosh, the Sefer Charedim, the Maharsha, Mordechai Molcho, a lot of these rabbis all agreed to exactly what we said. You see the land of Israel begin to be prosperous in agriculture, you should know that redemption has come. The fourth, when there are tragedies in Galut, it's a sign that it's time that you can leave.
Plenty of signs.
Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Tachtel says that when you see the Jewish people begin to suffer, he's writing this in the Holocaust, the way we're suffering now, you should know that it's absolutely a sign from Hashem that we don't belong here anymore. Because the words of the prophet have come true. He writes in the Holocaust. Vayash sherit Yaakov bagoyim, the remnants of the Jewish people will be among the nations. Ke'aryeh behemot ya'ar. The way the animals of the field are devoured by a lion. Kekfir beidrei tzon, or like the flock of sheep. Asher im avar v'ramas v'taraf ve'en matzir. The prophet says they'll be wiped out and destroyed and eaten and devoured, and there's nobody to save them. So this already was fulfilled in us. So the decree of exile has been fulfilled. It's already permitted for us to go home. And he brings a proof, by the way, from none other than Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. What people want to use to say that you can't go back now if you have permission. But he's the proof for this. He writes that if the Jewish people feel so persecuted that they decide that they want to go back to the land of Israel, you can be sure that Hashem has heard their voice. So that's the proof in the writings of Rabbi Yonatan Halevy that was written earlier is a contradiction. This is what I'm referring to. And when Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Tachtel says, well, they tell me, well, which one of them is right? Maybe the first source is a contradiction to this one. Who knows? So here's what Rabbi Yisachar Shlomo Tachtel writes. He says, "Ubatuach ani, I am certain. She'ilmale Rabbeinu Baal Avat Yonatan ha'echai imanu ata begalut." That if Yonatan Halevy was with me right now in the ghetto, Verat ma'amadenu hayom, and he would see what we're in right now. Haya batzma yomer li, he would tell us himself, Achenu b'nei Israel, my brothers, the house of Israel, Higia sha'a shel Eretz Eretz Avodeinu, it was time for us to leave and go back to the land of Israel. He said, even if all the sources you can bring me from Yonatan Halevy, there cannot be a thought in your mind that Rabbi Yonatan Halevy would be here now in the Holocaust and say, oh no, we should stay here. You're turning him into a fool. There's actually a group of Chachamim, the Rambam among them, who says that when there are tragedies in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, it's forbidden to stay there. You're not allowed to stay there. You must go. This is a halakha that you must go. And those who don't go are causing their brethren to sin. That's the Rambam.
Why are they causing the brethren to sin? They're causing themselves to sin.
And their brethren. You know how many rabbis I could quote to you? Art Scroll wrote biographies about them. That they stood there before the Holocaust and told all the Jews not to leave.
Yeah.
Stay, it's going to be okay. Hashem will save us. You know, if you talk about what I'm saying right now in the Orthodox, I could get thrown out of an Orthodox synagogue for saying the last sentence I just said. To speak about the rabbis who told the Jews to stay in Chutz La'aretz is considered one of the worst crimes in the world. If my wife was here right now, she would agree. If I would get up inside of a regular Orthodox synagogue and say, the rabbis who said that you should stay in Europe were wrong, who do you think you are?
You're just reporting the truth.
The fact that my wife's culture in that Hasidic community, you know the partisans that fought against the Nazis? They're not considered heroes. They're considered from the worst traitors in the world.
What?
They were rebels against the creator of the universe. Hashem wanted us to die, and these people felt that you...
Please.
Hold on, do I sound crazy right now?
Yes.
Yeah, of course I sound crazy. Anyone with a brain knows that sounds crazy, correct?
Of course it's
Yes, say please don't agree with them. But if you were to say, well, the Jews should have fought back, or the Jews who did fight back are heroes,
Yes.
I know you say of course.
Of course.
But if you were in any other synagogue in this country that's an Orthodox synagogue, they would throw you out of the Beit Knesset.
Isn't that like a Muslim idea that you just accept whatever someone says? You don't try to make it.
Well, I guess the Jews adopted that one too. Look at that.
Bro, but what's the logic of them arriving at that conclusion?
Who are you to fight the creator of the world?
That doesn't answer my question.
Well, to them, that's the answer to the question.
Even
It's
if
not very intelligent because, okay, you know what? Maybe I should stay home and not go to work.
Yeah.
And then I should die from hunger because who am I to fight the creator of the world? Why should I go get a job?
That's nonsense.
I mean, it's
Don't worry. Don't waste
ridiculous.
your brain cells too much. It's okay.
But isn't that one of the commandment from Hashem?
Which commandment?
That you must eat from your work. You must live. You must work to live. That's one of the commandments.
So why is it accepted in so much of the Orthodox community to not work and live from the charity of other people?
I think the leaders are entitled to that.
No.
Because the Torah says it.
Hold on. Leaders are not. Wait. Listen. Leaders are not working. I'm not embarrassed to tell you. I work.
That's
I wish
work.
I had the amount of time to study that I should have.
No, but that's
My work and the community compensates me for that work.
That is work.
But imagine if I told you, I don't want to be a rabbi. I don't want to give speeches. I don't want to answer your halakhic questions. I don't want to do your bar mitzvah. I don't want to do. I just want to sit in the corner of the Kehillat. I want to study Torah all day long, and you should pay for it.
That's against the Torah.
But there are hundreds of thousands of people who live like that in the Jewish community. Because a lot of times what it says in the Torah doesn't matter to anybody. I know it's frustrating. But this is why, from even the halachot of washing your hands, the push here always is, you must obey what it says in the Torah. You don't have the right to choose just because the other Jews do something else. So what? So what? Well, it's not the first time in our history that the majority of the Jewish people did something wrong and only the minority was correct. The first time in our history.
No.
The 10 of the 12 spies were evil people.
Doesn't it say in the Torah that it's a great thing to save even one Jew's life? Or is it-
Correct.
So how can you say that being a partisan during the Holocaust wasn't trying to save a Jewish life?
You want me?
It's absurd.
I'll try to help you judge that favorably. Remember, who is the ultra-Orthodox community's greatest enemy after the Holocaust? Are the Zionists.
Well, that's what they decided.
Correct. Self-decided enemy or not. They made the decision to hate these people. Correct? The Zionist movement glorified the Jews who fought. The fighting Jews.
Yes.
Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day. Which day is it established on? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it's the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Okay.
Okay? What the ultra-Orthodox community sees is this is a shameless pitch for you to say that the Jews who fought were better than the Jews who died.
It's not saying they're better.
Nothing is saying anything, but they don't wish to glorify. See, now I'm in Israel, and they're saying, hey, why don't you join us and fight the Arabs? No, we want to study Torah. You fight the Arabs. So if we begin to glorify warriors, then what happens? Then we show that the Zionists might be right. That's the reason why in the ultra-Orthodox community they don't study so much Tanakh.
It's just a black and white.
Because
I mean,
what
black
happens in
and white.
Tanakh? Half the rabbis were warriors, no?
Yeah.
Moshe Rabbeinu went to war, Yoshua went to war, all the Shoftim went to war.
Look at
King
the
David went to
Indian
war.
can show- they
So
all-
instead of showing you David the warrior, I wish to show you the David who sat down and studied Torah all day long. That's why I'm going to keep you away from the Tanakh. Because if you begin to engage with ideas in the Tanakh, it might overthrow my monopoly over Judaism.
Oh my gosh.
It's not a conspiracy theory, what I'm telling you now. It is a conspiracy. It's not a theory. This is a conspiracy. To save Jews from their own Judaism.
So they can have power over you?
Of course. Why else would you promote thousands of Jews not to get an education?
Sounds like the Catholic Church.
So you'll have dependency on me, correct?
Yeah.
Someone wrote me a Tariq Ham I spoke to. He wrote to me saying that his rabbi, when he was becoming religious in college, told him something. And it didn't sit well with him. So he went to discuss with another rabbi. And the rabbi said, the Rambam disagrees. Your rabbi on the campus is not correct. The Rambam says that you're right. He went back to his rabbi, and the college campus, no, the Rambam doesn't say that. So he went back to the second rabbi and said, can you give me the source? I want to take it to my first rabbi. So he brings the source, and the rabbi says, oy vey, why did he show you that source? I was trying to save you from the complications and the confusion of knowing that what the Rambam said. But that's the attitude of many people. I'm not going to teach you everything. I'm going to tell you only what I need you to know. Think about it. You know one of the biggest complaints that I get still from people who don't learn with me, from people who outside, is how come you're always saying Ashkenazi people do this, Sephardi people do that? Why can't you just have unity? Is it why can't I just have unity? I'll tell you how unity works. Unity works that I'm used to this. Ashkenazi rabbis teach you only what Ashkenazi people do. Sephardic rabbis will teach you only what Sephardic people need to do. And we're basically lying and saying there's only one way to do Judaism.
Right.
And I'm not willing to do that. I'm a Sephardic rabbi, and I'm very proud of being a Sephardic rabbi. I don't think I have any complex in that. But if I would stand in front of a room of Jews that have multiple heritages and ethnicities in them, how could I not teach them what their side of the Jewish equation says?
Of course you should.
Yeah, maybe I'm not the best. Like, if you were going to go on a debate now, and I should debate both sides, the Ashkenazi side and the Sephardic side, don't choose me to debate for the Ashkenazi side. I can logically do it, but it wouldn't sit. I'm biased. That's true. But at the very least, to represent, to show that there are two sides, or three sides, or four sides, you must. But that's an education that I received from my rabbi. Not everyone received that education. I don't take credit for it. I didn't invent some derech. But I learned from rabbis, multiple, not just one, who believe that showing a whole picture is much more important than showing a very narrow picture.
It also empowers people.
But see, that's right. When you empower people, Marlene, then it's dangerous. The Talmud says there are two people who are not jealous. A father and a mother, parents, are not jealous of their success of their children. Why?
You love them. You want them to succeed.
You love a lot of people, but when they succeed, it maybe makes you jealous. There's no greater joy for a parent to see that, wow, their kid made it.
Yeah.
I was an immigrant, I was a tailor, I had to work 17 jobs. My kid made it, they bought a house. What are the success? That's a success for me. So when you see parents, and there are parents, but you meet them, they're jealous of their children. It's a perversion of the way parents are supposed to be. Maybe they're really their parents. I don't know how to tell you.
No, they're probably just not too well balanced.
And the second is a rabbi. A teacher is not jealous of the success of their students. The greatest nachat for a teacher is when the student can say, Rabbi, I got everything I need to get from you. Right? I need to go to the next level now. It's not so scary. Shlomo HaMelech and David HaMelech says about his son Shlomo. He says, my son, Shlomo is the wisest man in the world. So I'm not saying bad about David, but it could be Shlomo's greater than David in knowledge,
in
wisdom.
some ways, maybe.
So then when David HaMelech says to Shlomo, if your heart is wise, my son, I will also be happy. I'm happy with your happiness.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me jealous of you. No. When there are people who they're afraid to empower their students or their communities, it's because they have a tremendous insecurity. That if you know too much, then you'll never listen to us again. Yes?
You know, Rabbi, the Christian community, that's exactly the method they use. What you're saying right now.
So it doesn't surprise me that people who spend thousands of years with the Christians have the same mentality.
That's the same exactly, strategy, or how you call that, to keep that group there, and to have that power over them, and that's how they built a bigger Christian community, by having those people sit on the bench for 100 years.
HaPeretz today, I was in that shiur of his.
So it is.
HaPeretz said, I'm going to tell you something now. I'm going to tell you something now, and all of you are going to be upset at me. So I want all of you to go and research what I said, and find me all the sources that disagree with what I said, and come back and argue with me. That might sound like, wow, that's very logical, but there are very few people in the world who teach like that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, his whole thing is, I'm so confident in what I say, I'm not afraid of your question. Or you'll prove me wrong, and that'll be the greatest thing that ever happened, because now I found the truth. If you're looking for the truth, you're not afraid to be wrong. Look at Rav Shalom. I cannot tell you about him enough. That he, his whole life, spent fighting against something, and it's so convenient then to say, like some rabbi said, you know why the Holocaust happened? Because there were Zionist Jews.
Oh, please.
You tell me, oh please, but the Orthodox community respects rabbis who said things like that. Yeah, the regular Orthodox community respects such rabbis. And what did Mr. Shlomo say? He said, I could have done that too. No. I'm going to say that everything that I taught my whole life is wrong. I'm going to systematically show you where I was wrong, how I made a mistake, and if that's not a great person for you, I don't know what is greatness. For a person to be able to say, listen, I'm the chief rabbi and I made a mistake. You know who else I remember doing that? Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef in his early years said, there's a mitzvah to put a mezuzah on your doorpost, and what to put on your roof. If people go to the roof. A fence. I mean, not in like California where houses, but in the Middle East where houses are flat and people spend a lot of time on the roof, you must put a barrier around your roof. Rabbi Yosef wrote that you don't make a bracha when you put up a mezuzah, yes, but not when you put up a makeh, a boundary. Now, many poskim disagreed with him. It's a biblical commandment. There should be a bracha for it. And once HaPeretz was giving a shivu, and he said, I'm sorry to say, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says you don't make a bracha, but I'm telling you, you must make a bracha. And one of the guys said, Rabbi, who are you to argue with Rabbi Yosef? Okay, that happens all the time in the yeshiva. So I raised my hand and I said, hold on, I'm new to this conversation. I just for the first time that month started studying the laws of Makkeh. I said, I'm pretty sure that I just saw Rabbi Yosef write that you do make a blessing on the Makkeh. And this guy was, no, he didn't say that. I said, listen, I have my notes, he didn't say that. So I said, okay, please let me come back tomorrow. I went, came back with a book, and I showed him. Rabbi Yosef writes, for many, many years I used to say, and I proved, and I brought many sources, that you're not supposed to make a blessing on the Makkeh. But I was incorrect. And this book came to me, and I changed my mind. And the halacha is like those people who disagreed with me all those years.
Good. Amen.
Now, what do some people say? See, Rabbi Yosef doesn't know everything. He's wrong. That only a fool says that. A person who appreciates truth says, wow. Imagine Rabbi Yosef could have just decided never to take back his opinion because it would look bad on him.
Well,
instead, he said, no, I'm willing to say that I as the chief rabbi, I made a mistake.
well, Rabbi,
It's
He's
okay.
a human being.
It's
Everybody
okay.
makes a mistake.
let me comment something there.
Oh.
In the Torah where these people ask Moshe Rabbeinu about their land.
Yeah, Benot Shlochad, yeah.
Yeah. And also when this man went out and, get firewoods or whatever,
Wood chopper.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what to do. He said, let me ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and let's see what he wants us to do. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have an answer right there. Moshe Rabbeinu had to say, put him in there, and let's see what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants.
Yeah.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the answer. So if these people will read a little bit more of the foundation of all this, Judaism.
I mean, if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know something, and he's the greatest of all the prophets, and
That's
he
what
gave
it says
us
right there in the
Sinai,
Torah.
yeah? So why are you afraid of not knowing
Exactly.
something?
Right.
I mean,
I was once sitting at I tell a lot of stories about Pit. Someone wants to listen. I said, listen, I don't care. I learned a lot from Surah Chacham. This is what I learned. I sat with Rabbi Pit on a test. He takes tests, 2 people or 3 people get together, and he gives you an oral examination. And at a certain point, he was asked this question, and we started mumbling because we didn't know the answer. Rabbi said, stop. Don't make up an answer. So lying is a biblical prohibition. He said, go and get me a Shulchan Aruch. We have 10 minutes left to your test. Let's learn it again together. We went to the bookshelf, we brought back a book. He said, no, one for every one of you. So we brought 4 books. And he sat there for 10 minutes like we were little kids, teaching us again the halakha. And he said, never make up an answer because you don't know something. He said, always teach people that you can say, I don't know the answer. Maybe I'm going to look it up. Maybe I'm going to get back to you. He said, but lying to a person, he said, what's the point? What are you going to get out of it? One day they're going to, so aside from the biblical provision, one day you're going to get caught in your lie, and one day you're going to, what's the point of that? He says, unfortunately though, many people say, oh, if the rabbi didn't know, he's a good-for-nothing rabbi. There are a lot of people like that. Don't think. There are a lot of people that when the rabbi says, I don't know, they disrespect the rabbi. I can tell you from first-hand experience. But those who really appreciate the truth will say, I appreciate that the rabbi didn't give me a lie. He said he's going to look into it for me. I appreciate that. Truthful people. Not everybody is truthful. I am very lucky that I have a kehillat, a small kehillat, that we all know each other. Other rabbis deal with kehillat. They walk into a battlefield. They walk into a place where there are people in certain Beit Knesset that are looking to destroy the rabbi. There's such a culture in the Jewish community. They're looking to destroy this person. You think it was just rabbis today. Chavetz Chaim had people like that in his community. The Ben Ish Chai had people like that. They used to make fun of him in public when he spoke.
Oh, gee.
wow.
The Rambam had people like that. And look, all those idiots, you don't even know their names. You know the guy's name in the Ben Ish Chai synagogue who made fun of him? No. But the Ben Ish Chai, you know his name. But why have to deal with that? Why have to deal with those kind of people? Because that's the ugliness that we find sometimes. But it's much more. I had a rabbi in Baltimore. I tell you, see, not everything started out with that. I found other chamim that had the same mentality. I had a rabbi in 10th grade in Baltimore, who if you would write a wrong answer, let's say he had 10 questions on a test, so every question was worth 10 points. If you wrote a wrong answer, minus 10. If you wrote, I don't know, you'd get 5 points.
Oh.
In which case, if you did all 10 questions, I don't know, you failed the test anyways, right? So that was the point there. But if you, let's say, didn't know 1 question or 2 questions, you still could pass the test. And it can make a difference. Let's say you were, I don't know, let's say passing grade is 4 questions wrong, right? That's a fail. Your fail is a 60. I don't know how it works today. I don't give grades. But if a person didn't know 4 questions, they can actually get an 80 on that exam instead of a 60. If you don't try to make something up, you just say, I don't know, I'm willing to pass you on the test. That was the education we got from him. was, I don't want to make my students lie. What's the point of that? What's the point of getting an answer wrong? Other teachers, they do silly things. You get points for your name, you have bonus questions in the Bible, all kinds of silly things teachers do to make it seem. No, just teach your students the most important thing is honesty. That education is a small thing. I know that my son Elchanan will grow up, and regardless of which school he goes to, which city he lives in, he's going to sit in some idiot's classroom. And someone is going to tell him, ask him a question he doesn't know the answer to, and when he doesn't know the answer, and he says, I don't know, they're going to make fun. I know, there's not a chance in the world he's not going to. There are teachers like that. You ever met a teacher like that? Someone's, oh, how do you not know? Someone's going to say that. Listen, I've been sitting here, 2012. Sometimes I'll ask a simple question, who wrote the Bet Yosef? And I'm in a room of people. You know how many times I say that in a year? If I told you, maybe I say 30 times a year, 40 times a year, who wrote the Bet Yosef? And that's maybe too little. But when would I say, oh, you idiots don't know who the Bet Yosef is? Who's going to come back and learn again? What did I teach people? I taught people that if memory is not perfect, you're good for nothing. Is that a good thing to teach people? Or is the greater lesson to say, just don't say an answer you don't know? Honesty is more. If we taught people that perfection is not so important, but honesty, perfection and honesty is important, you could have already made a better world. All the crooks and the criminals and the cheaters and all the people in the world would disappear. Because you would have taught an education that failure is when you're a liar. Failure is not when you don't know something. It's when you lie that you know something and you don't really know it.
Rabbi, so somebody can perhaps know a lot and they study and everything, but the way they grew up at their house when it comes to like natural living didn't get the right foundation of like human quality, simple human quality. Like, for instance, for a teacher to return, like if a student doesn't know something, right? And for a teacher to tell him, how can you not know? Where I grew up, this teacher will be considered an idiot.
Oh.
Where I grew up. Because where we grew up is a little bit different than Europeans. So a teacher that will respond that way to a student will be considered an idiot.
Look at the building, yeah?
That's just the way we...
Let's say you have a foundation, and the foundation is crooked.
Yeah.
But you buy the best materials for the walls, the best bricks, and the top-notch windows, and at the end of the day, your building is still going to be crooked.
Right.
Yeah.
When something is built crooked, you just keep building it crooked. By the way, talking about crooked, the Kehillat, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, I mentioned before, he wrote many books. He traveled Europe a lot. There's one of his books, only one, that he wrote in the town of Pisa. You know, the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It's interesting that people don't know. He named his book The Straight Wall of Pisa. It's like a little play on words, but he was... The Leaning Tower of Pisa?
No.
Chomat Anach, it's called. Anach stands for, it's like Tanakh. The Aleph could be either Torah or Oraita. So Oraita, Nevi'im, Ktubim spells Anach, not Tanakh. It was a play on words. And this idea of, you see something, you have a building, it's crooked. I don't know the story of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but you see things in life that are crooked, don't blame something happened later. Sometimes you think something is very insignificant. When someone calls, no, they don't have house phones anymore. Someone calls house phone, the kid picks up and says, can I talk to your mother? And he says, mother says, tell him I'm not home right now. Why? First off, half the people hear you on the phone when you say, tell them I'm not here right now, right? Only a fool says that. But you're teaching your kid to lie. Tell them I'm not available right now. I will call them back later. The message you tell your child is, the truth is important.
But one of your shul, the past class we had, that you say that in these times we're so used to the wrong thing that it became like normal.
That's right.
Yeah. I remember. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's like normal now. We don't feel bad about it anymore. It's just natural now.
I really wanted to finish with you. Will you give me 5 more minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. The rabbis who say you have to you leave galut when things get bad. The Rambam, the Ralbag. Remember who the Ralbag is? Rabbeinu David ben Gershom Gershonides. I mentioned him in the Sunday class 2 weeks ago. Magen Avraham.
Oh yeah, you did.
Magen Avraham writes that if a person stays in exile when the bad things happen, they're like a person who committed suicide. I mean, how can you decide to stay in a place which is dangerous for you? Rav Meir Shapira of Lublin, who started the Daf Yomi movement, is included. There's a story about him in the Ember Nismecha. I want to read you the story. Achshav nodali is a speech of his. Now I know lama atem mitnagdim la'aliyah b'nei haaretz. Now I know why you guys don't want to go back to Israel and build a land. Why you're against this movement. Shekol zman she'atem ochlim lechtege fish. So long as you're eating, if my Yiddish serves me right, lechtig is light fish, like good fish. So long as you're eating good fish. You know, sometimes people eat Sudat Shrit, like the Lithuanian people, they eat Sudat Shrit before sunset, like you're supposed to. You're eating fish when it's still light. It's good for you. Things that are good for you. Is you don't want to go, you don't care about Eretz because you're eating your fish. It's the middle of the day. Everything is good. But in our great sins, רוב כלל ישראל אינם אוכלים אלא finstere fish. I don't know that I'm saying it right. Said, but most of the Jewish people are eating fish in the dark. When the Hasidim, they keep going, their Surah goes late and late and late at night. He says, most of us are not living a beautiful life in Galut. You know, you think it's so great to be Jewish outside of Israel. But look at France.
Oh.
Look at other places where Jews have to hide being Jewish. So why are you opposing a movement that will make a place for the Jews to go home? You're the guys who have good jobs, who don't want to help the poor people get help. You're going to need it too one day. Wow. There are a number of days who say that the bad things that happen to us are in order to push us to go back home. Rav Emden, Rav Yehuda al-Kalai, the Okeach. The Shla Kadosh, Rabbi Yishayahu Levi Horowitz. He's an Ashkenazi Kabbalist. He writes that if you look in the story of Avraham Avinu, when they put him, Nimrod puts him in the burning, fiery furnace. So whenever the Jews get put in a fiery furnace, you should know it's time to run to Israel. That's what Avraham does next, no? Right after the furnace, Hashem says, go to Israel. We should know that sign. Whenever something bad happens to the Jewish people, we should run.
It's happening now in the world.
A number of our rabbis say that we should go before we get hurt in Galut. Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Peshischa was one of the big Hasidic rabbis, followed the Kotzker Rebbe and that line, the Ger Rebbe. He writes, you shouldn't wait for the stick to hit you before you go to Israel. Go before they start hitting you.
No, that's pretty much.
The Netziv and the Vilna Gaon write that it's our choice to go when the signs begin, or to go when it's so late that we have no choice. So we say in the prayer for Shema Hashem, V'tolichenu mehera kumimiyut artzenu. Let us go back to Israel with our head held up high. I was in Auschwitz with a Holocaust survivor who was in Auschwitz. And he was screaming, screaming. He said, I pray that the Jewish people should go home. Not that all the Jewish people go home. We know the Jewish people go home. The question, are we going to go home in coffins? Are we going to go home crawling, bruised, hurt? Are we going to go home standing up because we made a choice to go at the right time? That's our choice. The Galut will end. The Geulah will begin. But we will make a choice. When do we go? This Holocaust survivor was saying, we need to make a choice. We don't want to go after another Auschwitz. We want to go before they even have a chance to plan that for us. Almost 10 years before the Holocaust, when Hitler, Yimach Shmo V'Zichro, started already becoming famous in Europe. The Chavetz Chaim says, you know the verse that says that half of the Jews, remember when the tribes were split? So we go meet his brother and he said, half, maybe, why am I splitting my family into half? Because maybe the one who gets killed first, at least the other half will be saved. So Chavetz Chaim says, the Jewish people are being split into half, and those who go to Eretz Israel are going to be the half that are saved. Chavetz Chaim passes away in 1939. He was maybe saved from seeing what happened in Europe. But if the Jews would have listened to Chavetz Chaim and left, who knows? Who knows what could have been? I'm not blaming it. Who knows the difference in history? Rav Kook writes before the Holocaust, in a letter, Bo le'eretz Yisrael, come home to the land of Israel. Achim ni'imim, my pleasant brothers. Bo le'eretz Yisrael, come to the land of Israel. Hatzilu et nafshotechem, save your souls. Et nefesh dorotechem, the souls of your generations. Et nefesh amenu kulo, save the soul of our whole people. Rav Kook dies in 1933. This letter can't be sent later than 1933. If the Jews would have listened to the letter of Rav Kook, come, we're telling you, come, I'm inviting you. He's sitting in Israel, come. And they don't come. Nobody comes. They're all waiting. We need a prophet to come tell us. We need a Mashiach to come tell us. We need Eliyahu Navi to come tell us. Come on. How many people did Hashem send us already? Go to Israel. Go to Israel. Go to Israel. I once asked my grandfather, Sama, you want to go back to Yemen? We'll go on a tour. He said, what did I lose in Yemen that I need to ever go back there again? He said, the moment we heard that we can go to Israel, we ran out of Yemen. There were 200 Jews left in Yemen until recently. I remember asking my grandfather, Sama, they're donating to the fundraising. What should we give to the Jews over there in Yemen? He said, have no sympathy on the Jews who stayed in Yemen. He said, all of us left. All of us. Every single one of us left. These people who stayed, it's their fault they stayed in Galut. No, I don't speak like that to people. I'm not here to be harsh. My grandfather was saying, listen, all of us. What did we get when we came to Yemen? To Israel? They kidnapped our children. They put us in camps for years. They took our money. They took our jewelry. What? But what did we get? We're not stuck living in Yemen. Yeah, maybe we were second or third or fourth class citizens in Israel among our own brothers and sisters. But we were saved. We're not stuck in this ugly chutz la'aretz. That attitude didn't exist in other places. Go, come, there's a chief rabbi in Israel, there are people in Israel, we're building a country. Already before the Holocaust, we're given a freedom, a certain freedom of sorts, not entirely, to go to Israel. We didn't go.
So there's no why. So why they're complaining?
No, complaining because people murdered us in a terrible way. There's no reason for them to murder us. But for us, we have to say, when are we going to learn the lesson? How long do you want to wait here before something happens? And last but not least, Rav Tzvi Huda Kook says, the son of Rav Kook, that the Holocaust was a get. It was a get that was given to us to get rid of Europe, to leave. That Holocaust should have taught us that outside of Israel we don't belong anymore. I want to end off with something weird. This is weird. The Vilna Gaon was unparalleled in his obsession with making Jews go to Israel to build the Jewish country. People don't know this about the Gaon of Vilna. They only know the most things that people know about the Gaon of Vilna, they know from the Hasidim. The Hasidim don't like the Gaon of Vilna. So he gets a negative reputation. He's some dry, boring rabbi that was just hating of Hasidim. Few people learn about the Gaon of Vilna properly. The Gaon of Vilna was a tremendous personality. One of his biggest traits was pushing people to go to Israel. He spoke all the time about it. Rav Chaim of Volozhin writes, you don't have to agree. Sorry. His name is Rav Shraga Feivel Frank. He's a student of the Gaon of Vilna. And he says that he had a vision that the Gaon of Vilna's birth in the world was the end of the decree to go back to Israel. And then ever since the Gaon of Vilna was born, he has a spark of the Mashiach ben Yosef. He's not the Mashiach ben Yosef. He's a spark. I mean, his soul is very closely connected to the Mashiach that comes before the final Mashiach. Now, those of you who know, there are different opinions, whether the Mashiach was there or not. That's a different topic to speak at a different time. And he says, since the birth of the Gaon of Vilna, the Jews could go back home. And that's why the Gaon of Vilna dedicated his whole life to sending the Jews back home. Because he felt that it was okay. So if the Gaon of Vilna felt it was okay, regardless of whether he believed this or not, then why would rabbis even argue with the Vilna Gaon? On which grounds you're arguing with him? He already sent Jews back. His students lived in Israel already. Almost 200 years. There are descendants of the Vilna Gaon living in Israel. They have their own community. They have their own customs. They have their own everything. It's a community of the students of the Vilna Gaon. They were there before any of the modern Zionists were there.
Interesting.
They still live today in the old city of Yerushalayim. One of them wrote for Harav Peres's tefillin. He commissioned him, paid him a lot of money, that he should be the one to write his tefillin. Friends, that's reason number 2. Next week, we're going to do more. That's 5 subcategories of number 2. I think I want to summarize here. That is, there are many, many signs along the way that tell us, it's time to go home. It's okay to go home. And I told you already, I used to teach this in Eretz. I'm stuck here in San Diego, so I feel guilty teaching this here. But I'll tell you this. And the one thing we could do is, on an ideological level, be from those who go back to Eretz. There are so many Jews in this city, in this place, in this town, that for them Zionism is a muktzah word. You can't use it. Synagogues where Israeli Independence Day means nothing to them. Rabbis who won't say the prayer for the state of Israel. They hand it off to the gabbai, to the president, to the... It's time for Am Yisrael at least to fight the ideology of these people. These are the same rabbis that will tell us Chaz v'shalom was a Holocaust. They will be from the Gula. Stay here, it's going to be okay. Don't go with those evil Zionists to Israel. That's who they identify with. That's the camp they belong to. So now it doesn't seem that way? Of course, because Baruch Hashem, we're not on the brink of a Holocaust. But these are the same rabbis who then gave that advice, who are the same rabbis who are the descendants of those same Jews who said, why should we go to the land of Israel? We're the 10 spies. It's terrible over there. Let's go back to Egypt. No, we had in our history, the Torah mentions the story. Why? The Gaon of Vilna says, because in every generation you have people like this. But the Gaon of Vilna says you should know that the generation where the Jews go back home, who's going to be the greatest discouragers of Jews going back home?
Jews.
The religious Jews. They will be the ones, Tofsei HaTorah. Those who hold on to the Torah will be those who try to dissuade and convince everyone that what's going on in Israel is not part of our redemption. The Gaon of Vilna wrote this hundreds of years before there was a state of Israel. And unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, unfortunately his words came true. We at least can dedicate ourselves to turning back that tide ideologically. Next week.
Amen.